Number 10. Draculina. To be clear, when we talk about heroes you've never heard of, we're more talking about those that sit on the outskirts of the superhero fandoms, so you won't find them likely on the big screen or on DC's or Marvel's main teams like the Justice League, Avengers, or the X-Men. Instead, these are heroes who come from a more humble background by comparison. Some of them may have been simply forgotten due to just how long they've been around, whereas others typically are associated with smaller or even in some cases now defunct publishers. Coming from the world of fellow indie hero Vampirella, Draculina is sort of Ella's adopted sister and also kind of her ex-lover or ex-one-night stand. There have actually been at least 2 different Draculinas, possibly 3 at this point. One is Lilith's biological daughter and the biological twin sister of Vampy, who is blonde. The other one, the one I'm focusing on, who was once Vampy's lover, became obsessed with her and was eventually adopted by Lilith to become the new Draculina. If you want to learn more about her and other Vampy adjacent characters, Sacred 6 is a pretty cool comic that I would recommend that you check out. Or you can learn more about this version of Draculina in the 2019 Vampirella series from Dynamite. Both of those series, by the way, are by Christopher Priest. Both Draculinas go by the name Victory, although the one we're talking about here was originally named Victoria, but the two do differ in terms of appearance and, like I said, blood relation. Blood relation in this context almost becomes a vampire pun. This new Draculina isn't exactly a vampire, by the way, but is armed with a demonic ring that basically grants her powers similar to one, allowing her to accurately play the part. Draculina is currently a property of Dynamite Comics. Number 9. Tony Chu. Tony Chu is a quirky and unique character, but still is ultimately a hero, and even technically has superpowers, so he would qualify as a superhero. Tony is a detective who possesses the unique power of sebopathy. Whatever he eats, except for beets, he gains in-depth knowledge of, being able to tell where all the ingredients that make it up came from, being able to taste everything about that ingested food. Tony uses this skill to basically solve murders mainly, sometimes even ingesting parts of victims or the accused, sometimes even ingesting parts of the victims or the suspects to learn more about the case and help solve it. He initially worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, but ultimately gets fired after they witness him eating part of a deceased suspect. He later is hired by the FDA. Number 8. Red Sonja. One of my favorite lesser known heroes is Red Sonja. Red Sonja comes to us from the less sci-fi, more fantasy-based world of sword and sorcery. She is an extremely gifted fighter, marksman, and sword bearer. Red Sonja, the she-devil, is said to have been given her name for, well, many different reasons. One such story as to how she got her name is that she left to seek out adventure and her fortune and became a mercenary, earning the name Red because of all the blood that she spilled. Red Sonja, while not a traditional hero, pretty much always stands up to those who are cruel and corrupt, often fighting for those who are oppressed, even against her better judgment. She has even fought death before in combat and won, allowing her to live on when she was on the brink of death. Red Sonja was once a character from the Marvel Comics wheelhouse, but currently calls Dynamite Comics her home. Number 7. Vampirella, but you can call her Vampy. Vampirella isn't a conventional hero by any means, but she definitely tries to do what's best by folks while still being a vampire from outer space, and at the same time with ties to Lilith and Hell. Overall, she's both complicated and also kinda super simple, and it's that weird blend of those two very different elements that I love about her. Vampy, being an intergalactic vampire, is super strong, fast, can fly because she actually has wings, and also has been shown to have access to advanced technology at times due to her ties to the planet Draculon. Vampirella is currently attached to Dynamite Comics, but was originally a property of Warren Publishing. Number 6. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a popular hero as far as the lesser known or indie heroes go, so if you haven't heard of him before, you might want to check him out. Initially, his origins were a mystery. All we knew was that he was a humanoid, green-skinned, dragon-like character who decided to fight as a police officer and hero, fighting against the criminal and mutant super freaks of Chicago. That's also in part because Savage Dragon initially had really bad amnesia in the comics, so he didn't actually even remember his own origin story at the time. Savage Dragon hails from Image Comics and was originally introduced as simply Dragon before being known under the mantle of Savage Dragon. His powers include super strength and super healing. Number 5. Witchblade. Witchblade is a hero who comes from Top Cow Productions. Mainly we've known Witchblade as Sarah Pizzini, but the Witchblade has belonged to many other powerful women throughout the years. The Witchblade is an ancient mystical artifact that typically binds itself to a host who can then wield and use its powers at will. It can be more more or less powerful depending on the host. But in this case, since Sarah is one of the most well-known hosts of the Witchblade, we're gonna basically base the ranking on her abilities. The Witchblade can be used to summon mystical armor, which can cover the entirety of its host's body, though typically most are not skilled enough to actually summon that much armor, and instead are usually only covered in little pieces of armor as a result. Hence why you see that Witchblade art and she's like, not really covered in much. This armor grants the wearer invulnerability, but even if its host is harmed, it also grants the power to heal. Aside from creating armor, the Witchblade can also be used to create weapons on the fly. It also increases its host's strength and endurance. Sarah herself was also a trained NYPD detective prior to becoming the host for the Witchblade, so she also brings her skills as an officer and detective to the table. Number 4. Luther Strode. Luther Strode is the main character in the Strange Talent of Luther Strode series, a series that hails from Image Comics. Luther ends up acquiring powers that enhance his strength, durability, speed, and combat skills after receiving a mail order exercise program known as the Hercules Method. Luther's powers, however, only create more harm than good in his life and lead to a lot of death, much of it happening as a result of his own involvement. Try as he might to try and do good with it. While not a conventional hero, Luther definitely fits the bill of an anti-hero, or more accurately tragic hero archetype, with everything going awry no matter his intent. He's also someone I would personally love to see take on the hero who made our number 2 spot. Number 3. Radiant Black. Radiant Black is Nathan Burnett, or was Nathan Burnett. Nathan to start, anyways. Going to try not to spoil this series because it's one that I think we should all be reading, so I'm just gonna leave it at Nathan for now. Radiant Black is the first hero we meet in this series. In issue number 1, Nathan ends up getting the powers of the Black Radiant, which basically means he has the powers of a black hole. Radiant Black can manipulate gravity and also becomes super dense with this power set. The downside for this hero is being new means that he's pretty inexperienced in the comics thus far. However, gravity manipulation as a power set is insane, which is how he ranks so high up on this list despite his inexperience. Radiant Black hails from Image Comics, and like I said, if you have not checked out this series and gotten to know the Radiants yet, well, you definitely need to change that, and you need to do so. It's like Power Rangers, but possibly cooler, and I say that having much respect and much love for Power Rangers. So that's not a snub at all, it's just like, it's really good. Number 2. Bulletproof. You know Invincible, but do you know Bulletproof? Fans of the comic series likely do, but if you just became an Invincible fan via the animated series, then this isn't a character that you'd be familiar with just yet. After all, at this point we've only had 1 season so far, so it's very likely Bulletproof will appear in the series, just not until a bit later on. Bulletproof is Zandel Rudolph. He got his powers as a result of his brother using him as basically a science experiment, as his brother Tyrone was actually obsessed with superpowers. Zandel would end up getting powers as a result of this mad science, while his brother would end up dead. Bulletproof also goes on to take up the Invincible mantle at one point, filling in for Mark when he is off-world. Zandel's powers are based on energy absorption, which I think is one of the strongest power sets to have personally. Bulletproof, like other heroes in the Invincible universe, comes to us from Skybound, which is an imprint of Image Comics. Number 1. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I see a lot of similarities there. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that you can create. Jackie as the Darkness can also create dark tendrils, which he can also turn into weapons, and he can also summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions. And if you do know the Witchblade, you probably know the Darkness, or vice versa. Number 10. Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from the self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with force like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 9. Lord Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She is a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny. Although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero, as she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it, hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the super-heroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. X-O Manowar. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, X-O Manowar. X-O Manowar is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the X-O Manowar suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. X-O Manowar is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor-Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Orbston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti-God. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the Anti-God and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great. Everyone go read all the Black Hammer things. It's like a whole universe now.
Number 10, Daredevil. No, not that Daredevil. This Daredevil is Bart Hill, who witnessed his father's murder before the killer branded him with a hot iron, making him mute with shock. He learned to become an expert boomerang thrower and became a costumed crime fighter. He was later rendered unmute with no explanation, and honestly isn't that interesting. He actually appeared after Superman, but fell into the public domain and has therefore been used by several different publishers, although they often change his name to avoid conflicts with the Marvel legal team. Number 9, Miss Fury. First appearing in 1941 in newspaper strips published by Bell Syndicate, Marla Drake was a wealthy socialite who was attending a party when she discovered that another woman was wearing the same outfit as her. In order to prevent embarrassment, she changed into a ceremonial panther skin outfit that her uncle had taken from Africa and willed to her. The suit of course granted her superpowers, which she used to fight crime and achieve a level of cultural appropriation most white people can only dream of. Talk about my culture is not a costume. Her powers are basic acrobatic, climbing, and fighting powers, and she was known for using her claws and whip against her enemies. She actually didn't use the suit very often, as her manservant, a Brazilian albino Indian named Albino Joe, Jesus Christ. Well, he warned her that every favor that was gained through black magic would result with 2 misfortunes. Her comic strip appearances were later compiled by the company that would one day become Marvel, Timely Comics. This has made the rights to her a little hard to follow, as she is considered canon to the Marvel universe, but also has appeared in comics published by both Malibu and Dynamite Comics. What makes her notable is that Miss Fury was the first female superhero to actually be created by a woman. Alright, that's all of the characters who you could argue were part of the Golden Age. From here on out, all of the entries were created before Superman first appeared in June 1938. Number 8, Doc Savage. Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, first appeared in Doc Savage magazine number 1 in 1933, 5 whole years before Superman. He appeared in pulp magazines, which would tell the stories of the character in prose with some illustrations, rather than in a purely visual medium as comics would end up doing later. In 2016, Stan Lee actually went on record as saying that Doc Savage was the forerunner to modern superheroes as we know them. Doc Savage's story is that his father assembled a group of scientists who were all experts in their fields to train his son almost from birth to make him a perfect human specimen who is at peak human condition and is a master martial artist and scientist, physician, inventor, explorer, and detective. He was raised in the jungle where he received a really intense tan, earning him the nickname the Man of Bronze. After his father was killed, he decided to devote himself to fighting crime, traveling the world and battling criminals. He is extremely rich and has a base in the Arctic that he calls the Fortress of Solitude. He is aided by a team of friends known as the Fabulous Five, who are all experts in their scientific fields, but of course not as expert as Doc Savage is. In his third appearance in 1933, Quest of the Spider, he is referred to as a Superman by one of his colleagues. Doc Savage has appeared in pulp novels, radio stories, and movies over the years, but isn't nearly as well known as the hero he inspired. He has made comic appearances for both Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse over the years. Number 7, the Green Hornet. This is a character you are likely at least aware of due to the Seth Rogen movie and the classic 60s television show starring Bruce Lee, but the Green Hornet's history goes back even further than that. First appearing in his own radio series in 1936, the Green Hornet is really Britt Reed, the owner of the Daily Sentinel newspaper. At night, the Green Hornet fights evil with the help of his driver, Kato, in their supercar, the Black Beauty. What makes the Hornet unique is that he pretends to be a criminal so that he can infiltrate the various gangs of his city in order to take them down. In a fun bit of lore building, Britt's father is actually Dan Reed Jr., the nephew of the Lone Ranger. The Green Hornet made the jump from radio to the big screen in 1940, appearing in 2 serials, The Green Hornet and The Green Hornet Strikes Again. He appeared from time to time in his own comic book series, which adapted his radio stories, but his most iconic appearance was in the 1966 television show, which starred Van Williams as the Hornet and Bruce Lee as Kato. The show was made by the same team who made the 60s Batman show, but employed a more serious tone than the campy Batman show. It lasted for 1 season, but has managed to stay in the public consciousness, being the main inspiration for the 2011 film. The license for Green Hornet comics is currently with Dynamite Comics, who have taken him back to his Depression-era roots. If you want to familiarize yourself with the Hornet's sting, might I recommend Chuck Wagner Wagner's Green Hornet Year 1. Number 6. The Shadow. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows! First created in 1930, The Shadow was originally the narrator of the Detective Story Hour radio program, which was created to help boost the sales of Detective Story magazine. People began asking the newsstand vendors for that Shadow Detective magazine, and the publishers decided to develop an actual character for the narrator and give him his own pulp magazine series, The Shadow Magazine, which by 1937 received its own radio series. There was some inconsistencies between the character in the radio program and magazine appearances, so we'll go with the more well-known version of the story. The Shadow is a man who has traveled the world and learned how to cloud men's minds and become invisible, hiding in the shadows to attack criminals. He has taken over the life of a wealthy playboy named Lamont Cranston, whose identity he uses to fund his exploits and gather intel from his friend, the police commissioner. If this sounds kinda Batman-y to you, then you would be right, as the Shadow was a major influence on Batman's modus operandi. In fact, the Shadow story, Partners of Peril, was lifted almost verbatim by Bob Kane when he wrote the first Batman story featured in Detective Comics number 27. Both feature the hero investigating a series of murders of a group of businessmen who own a chemical syndicate together. Both feature the hero getting trapped under a glass dome that fills with gas that they then plug with a handkerchief, proving once again that Bob Kane was a talentless hack who would have never been remembered if it weren't for Bill Finger. The Shadow has appeared in pulp magazines and radio dramas and films over the years. His most recent feature film was in 1994, starring Alec Baldwin as the title character. It's actually pretty underrated. The character is currently licensed to Dynamite Comics and has a pretty extensive catalog of appearances available for readers. Number 5. The Phantom. The Phantom first appeared in comic strips in 1936 in the fictional African country of Bangala after a castaway whose ship was attacked by pirates washed up on shore and was adopted by the locals. He swore revenge on all evildoers and developed the persona of the Ghost Who Walks, otherwise known as the Phantom. The mantle is passed down through generations, with each new Phantom being sworn to protect the jungles of Bangala. The Phantom whose adventures are most commonly followed is Kit Walker, the 21st Phantom. Although his purple costume might come across as silly, he was the first hero to wear skin-tight clothes and a mask which obscured the pupils, leaving only the white eyes, something that is of course a staple of masked superheroes now. He is also known for wearing 2 rings, one of which he uses to leave a skull-shaped mark on the villains he punches. The Phantom has appeared in comics, novels, serials, and a live-action movie in 1996 starring Billy Zane. Number 4. The Spider. The Spider was created in 1933 to be a direct competitor to the Shadow. He is really millionaire Richard Wentworth, who disguises himself in early appearances by wearing a mask, a wig, and a false hunchback. He has no issues with killing his enemies and always used his ring to leave a spider-shaped mark on his victims' foreheads so no one but him would be blamed for his actions. He is aided by his manservant Ram Singh and is a master of disguise, adopting several aliases in order to infiltrate and gather information. His stories are notable for being extremely violent, with the various villains' death tolls routinely going into the thousands by the end of each story. He was the first pulp hero to be given a live-action serial in 1938, where he was given a new look that featured a red spiderweb, which helped to distinguish him from the Shadow. In the years since his pulp novel appearances, the Spider has been featured in comic book series published by Eclipse Comics, Moonstone Books, and Dynamite Entertainment, who adopted Spider's serial costume to the page for the character. Number 3. Black Bat. There are actually 2 Black Bats. The first from 1933, who was a roaming detective who left bat-themed calling cards, and the more popular one from 1939, who debuted around the same time as Batman. Anthony Quinn was a district attorney until one day in court someone threw a vial of acid in his face, which disfigured and blinded him. In the words of Tobey Maguire, it looks very, similar. The attack blinded Quinn, but fortunately a police officer who is dying from gangsters' bullets donates his eyes to Quinn. After the surgery, Quinn is not only able to see normally, but can also see in the dark. He becomes a costumed crime fighter who leaves bat-shaped stickers on his victims, so much like the Spider, no one else is blamed for his crimes. Because he and Batman hit the stands around the same time, both publishers sued each other, but the editor of DC Comics, Whitney Ellsworth, managed to broker an agreement agreement that made both companies leave each other free to publish Bat-themed stories, although Batman certainly is the more well-remembered of the two. Number 2. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Debuting in January 1938, a full 6 months before Superman, is Sheena, the very first female superhero to receive her own self-titled book. Sheena was an orphan who was raised by an African witch doctor who taught her how to survive and various African languages. She grew up in the jungle and learned to communicate with its animals. She eventually becomes friends with a hunter named Bob Reynolds, and the two protect the jungle from giants, dinosaurs, cults, vampire apes, and everything else under the sun. Sheena was co-created by Jerry Iger and comics legend Will Eisner, and appeared in comics and pulp novels and received her own TV series in 1955 and 2000, and a live-action film titled simply Sheena in 1984. She is also the inspiration for both Tina Turner's stage persona and the Ramones song Sheena is a Punk Rocker. Like many of the pre-Golden Age heroes on this list, she is currently licensed to Dynamite Entertainment, who released new comics about this classic hero. Number 1. Mandrake the Magician. First appearing in newspaper strips in 1934, several historians credit Mandrake, not the Man of Steel, as being the first comic book superhero. He is a stage magician who uses hypnotic gestures to make people see illusions, which he of course also uses to help him fight crime. He has the power to teleport, shapeshift, levitate, and to become invisible. His hat and wand possess great magic and were passed down to him by his father, Theron. He fights both criminals and supernatural threats, aliens, and figures from other dimensions. He's like Zatanna and Doctor Strange rolled into one. Mandrake appeared in comic strips until 2013, but never really had his own comic books, aside from reprints and a few miniseries, one of which was actually released by Marvel. He has guest starred in stories for The Phantom and Flash Gordon, and a series featuring a new character taking up the mantle called Legacy of Mandrake the Magician, which was released in 2020 by Red 5 Comics. He appeared in his own movie serial in 1939, and there have been a few attempts to adapt the character for film and television, but none have panned out.
Number 10. Tosin Oduye. Tosin is such a cool character. Okay, so as a kid, Tosin Oduye saw the way that Wakanda became a socially isolated nation who believed themselves superior and seemed to always attract war. The Marube, the tribe Tosin belongs to, began to separate a bit from the main Wakandan people. They hated the way Wakanda used vibranium for tech, so they instead found a way to refine the vibranium and flow with it. They gave themselves vibranium tattoos, and some in their tribe, who trained hard enough, could have the vibranium flow with them, granting them some pretty cool powers. It's like they harness the energy of vibranium and can use it to move extremely fast, or unleash vibranium energy blasts, or even seemingly grant himself a vibranium armor. Last thing I want to say is that the covers for the issues of this volume of Black Panther are just so cool. Definitely check it out.
Number 9. Aleph Chernikov. Aleph Chernikov is a young mutant hero who appears in the Wolverine Patch flashback series by Larry Hama. This was a miniseries that came out earlier in 2022 and covered an untold tale from Patch's adventures in Madripoor back in the good old days. Here Patch works to help 3 Russian mutants who have escaped their government, but have been tracked to Madripoor. Madripoor is military, royal armed guards, as well as S.H.I.E.L.D. and Russia themselves appear to be after the mutants, but Patch, Archie, and Tiger intervene in hopes of helping the 3. In the end they do, and among them is Aleph, the child of the other 2 mutants, David and Raisa. Aleph appears to be the main focus of everyone's efforts when it comes to hunting them down. They possess powerful healing abilities, psionic abilities, and possibly even the power to manipulate reality. But they're also a child, so of course everyone's like, we gotta protect this baby.
Number 8. Bitewing. There's nothing that wins me over more than a puppy. But then DC goes and gives a puppy a 3-legged gray blue-eyed Pipple puppy and gives it to Nightwing, probably one of the best members of the Bat family. And then they go and give it the nickname of Bitewing. I literally teared up just typing this part because of the overload of adorable that I got while looking at this. Haley the dog was being chased and mistreated by some teenagers when Dick Grayson stepped in, rescued, and adopted her. Now, the first sidekick turned full-on hero in DC Comics has his very own super pet, especially after she was given a costume and the ability to speak from a 5th-dimensional imp. Now, she fights alongside Nightwing as Bitewing, and it's cute. It's very cute.
Number 7. Escapade. I love Escapade, and I also love her BFF Morgan Red. While initially introduced as a criminal in the Marvel Voices Pride issue of this year, I think it's safe to say that Escapade and her friend Morgan and his genetically engineered flying turtle pal, Hibbert, will soon become a team of mutant heroes instead of anti-heroes. I mean, even if they are criminals who steal stuff, they really only try to steal stuff from the worst people, which makes them still pretty altruistic. Escapade is a trans mutant named Sheila Sexton, whose powers involve swapping places with whoever she decides to use her mutant powers on. This can be someone as low level as a random passerby, or someone as high level as another superpowered being who is about to defeat her, or even the President of the United States. So much potential for this power.
Number 6. Bolt. Since the live-action Black Adam movie was announced, DC decided that they would also put out a Black Adam solo series for the first time. And in the first issue, it puts Black Adam on the ropes of mortality. In response to this, Black Adam finds his descendant, Malik Adam White, a medical student living in the Bronx. Basically, Black Adam just tells this guy he is going to succeed Black Adam and inherit his power, and then he forces him by having one of his people pop a cap in Malik, and the only way to save himself is to take Black Adam's ring and say Shazam. While Black Adam calls Malik White Adam, Malik gives a good little lecture about the inherent racism there. So he prefers to go by Thunderbolt or just straight up Bolt. From what I've read, I really like his character, and he is supposed to represent a sort of form of redemption for the character of Black Adam because, as they say in the comic, there is no true redemption for Black Adam. Not at this point, at least.
Number 5. Amass. Amass is a really cool new mutant. They made their first appearance in Steve Orlando's Marauder series in issue number 4. Amass is a mutant of Threshold, the oldest mutant civilization to have ever existed. They, along with 2 other mutants, had their minds stored within a codex, hoping that they would arrive in the future after being restored and would be able to seek help for their people who were on the brink of extinction when they last left them in the past. Amass's mutant powers allowed them to physically combine mutants and their powers together, joining together to create one basically big ball of mutants, which kinda looks like one big being. Hence their mutant name of Amass. This appears to both psychologically and physically combine whichever mutants they choose with themselves, with their new combined form also possessing all the powers of said mutants, which I think is pretty nuts.
Number 4. Grey Wolf. Of the characters I'm talking about on this list, my favorites are absolutely a 3-way tie between Tosin, Bitewing, and this guy, Grey Wolf. Okay, so Lex Luthor was running a crime-fighting experiment around the world trying to create a group of his own similar to Batman Incorporated, with the ultimate goal of creating Abyss, his own Batman. But then he abandoned all these projects that then went wild doing their own thing. So Batman Incorporated's international team, being led by Ghostmaker, go on a mission to bring them down in Batman 2022 Annual Volume 3 Number 1 from July. Their first mission is to Kazbek, Chechnya, to take on Grey Wolf. Grey Wolf was unleashed on the city to help its citizens who had been exposed to Lazarus resin that had made them all extremely violent. With Ghostmaker, he was able to cure the residents and join Batman Inc. as a good guy, but he displayed enough skill to best Dark Ranger, El Gaucho, and Batman of Japan in a 3-on-1 fight, and he beat Wingman 1-on-1. Also, he's like 7 feet tall minimum. Super cool.
Number 3. Black Mist. Black Mist is a completely new character who is not yet a member of Batman Incorporated, but who might end up becoming one in the future. She was actually one of my favorite characters to appear in Batman Inc. issue number 1 from 2022. Not only does she look like a badass, but she also seems to be wary of joining up with Batman Inc. Black Mist appears as a sort of consulting detective in issue number 1 of the 3rd volume of this series. We don't know much about her yet, but she seems to be working with Batman Incorporated to help them solve the mystery behind just who is killing all the teachers of Batman and Ghostmaker, and why and how this perpetrator is doing that. One thing we do know about Black Mist straight out of the gate is that she seems to have history with the Knight. The two recognize each other and are presented as friendly to one another.
Number 2. Egro the Unbreakable. Okay, so this one definitely took me by a bit of a surprise. Coming out of the 2022 volume of Thunderbolts, specifically issue number 2, we are introduced to Egro. Egro is a super interesting little troll-looking monster who lives peacefully on Monster Isle. But you see, Egro heard of the monster exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, so naturally he expected to go and see his own statue. He just had to make sure that it captured his true beauty. But what the heck? They didn't have a statue for Egro the Unbreakable? An insult like that could not fly, so he obviously had to destroy the other statues for the other monsters, which brought the Thunderbolts to fight him. Instead, after Egro punched Power Man through the roof with his big lava hands and incapacitated Persuasion with his telepathic abilities, which helped him learn English, he surrendered to America Chavez and explained the situation. Then, he was invited to join the team. Yay! Happy ending for the little steroid Yoda.
Number 1. Nightmite. Just like Superman has Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batman has Batmite, Dick Grayson, the superhero known as Nightwing, now has his own imp superfan from the 5th dimension, Dixel, though Dixel prefers to be known as Nightmite. While it might seem strange to put an imp from the 5th dimension on a superhero list given, you know, some of their track records, Nightmite is genuinely well-meaning and helpful, unlike most other imps who are somewhat mischievous or just downright troublesome. Being an imp from the 5th dimension also means that Dixel can be super powerful, as he has magical, reality-bending, and warping powers. Nightmite made his first appearance very recently in the comics, as of the time of this recording, in issue number 98 of Nightwing, which was released in November of 2022.
And coming in at number 10, Vanish. Image Comics seems to be going back to its gritty, magical roots with Vanish. Vanish follows Oliver Harrison. This chosen one peaked at the age of 14 when he took down the leader of the biggest threat to his universe in a mystical place called the Everkeep. Now, as an adult, this chosen one indulges in every vice he can, living a mediocre, pretty sloppy life. Until a group of heroes show up called the Prestige, who are actually the followers of the threat that Oliver took down when he was 14. Now, using his magical abilities, Oliver takes it on himself to play the part of a hero in the disguise of a villain to bring down the heroic Prestige. The comic builds up this super cool, magic, but violent world. It's incredibly gritty but filled with dark fantasy and magic, and it's just so cool. Number 9. Rogue Sun. Dylan Siegel has been living life with his mom when he's suddenly called to a reading of his estranged father's will. Now, during that reading, he discovers his dear old dad was a superhero called Rogue Sun, and now Dylan has been granted the superhero mantle for himself. Now, this super angsty teen is in charge of protecting our world from the forces of the supernatural, while also trying to figure out who exactly took down his dad. The art in this story is awesome, and Rogue Sun's suit is incredibly cool. With really cool fire-based abilities and a whole lot of family drama, Rogue Sun from Image Comics is a fun story you should definitely check out. Number 8. Dr. Multiverse. Alright, breaking away from Image Comics now and landing firmly in DC's territory, we have Maya Chamara, Dr. Multiverse. Dr. Multiverse is alone in the multiverse, meaning there is only one of her. Originating from Earth 8, Maya was bathed in cosmic energies and was granted the powers of the multiverse, which basically means that she's able to see variants and alternate versions of people living in different realities. She can see people and objects passing between dimensions, and she has the ability to locate and track anything she has come into contact with throughout the multiverse. She also has access to vast energy manipulation abilities, which let her fire blasts and create shields, but she can totally open up portals to other universes and send people back to their own universe. This former member of the Retaliators became part of the Justice League Incarnate, using her multiversal powers to help this multiversal team of heroes. She's like a DC version of Marvel's Captain Universe, Starbrand, and America Chavez all just mixed into one, but I think she's pretty alright. Number 7. Batwalker. I'm gonna be honest, I just assumed this had already been done in the past, but no. Dinosaur versions of DC's superheroes had not been done before. I'm alright with this because that means this year we were treated to the Jurassic League, a DC story that takes place on an Earth where heroes like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are actually dinosaurs that protect the puny human race from the carnivore dinosaurs who would eat them. There's a Brachiosaurus Supersaur from another world who looks eerily like Superman, a Triceratops Wonder Dawn hailing from the Isle of Trimascara, and on the outskirts of Growltham City, we are introduced to Batwalker, an Allosaurus who dresses up like a bat after the loss of his parents at the hands of an insane Dilophosaurus who goes by the name Joker Jokerzard. I mean, there's even a panel of this comically green Allosaurus throwing a stone batarang, and it's just something that I never knew I needed in my life until this point. I'm just so glad it exists. Number 6, the Spirit of Variance, Vox Igni. Sean Cassidy is not a new character by any stretch of the imagination, but in Legion of X number 7 by Marvel, he does become something completely new. Sean was betrayed by Moira McTaggart, who stole his face so she could enter into Krakoa. So when he was brought back to life, he was rather upset. Now there's a whole thing going on as well with the character of Legion right now that I just can't get into, but essentially a character named Mother Righteous offers Legion a gift in the form of a certain kind of power. David Haller refuses this gift, but luckily for us, Sean Cassidy was there to take it instead. Making a deal with Mother Righteous, Cassidy was given, or I guess possessed by, a cast out spirit of vengeance called the Spirit of Variance. This transformed Banshee into a flaming skull version of himself named Vox Igni, which is the voice of fire, and if a name like that doesn't sound cool to you, then just look at this character. Good golly, he's awesome. Number 5, Bat Prince. Another alternate version of Batman, I know, but he belongs to probably one of my favorite alternate reality stories to come out of DC Comics, Dark Knights of Steel. This story takes place in a world of medieval fantasy where the Wayne family ruled their kingdom until the mother and father of Superman came to Earth. The L family house became rulers of the land after a horrible attack on the Wayne family. Now, as the surviving son of the Waynes, Bruce serves as both a knight and son to the L family, with his network of Robins and his brilliant mind. But as the world is at each other's throats in this story, this Bat Prince learns about the actions that led to his birth and the powers he now possesses as a half-Kryptonian Dark Knight. Dark Knights of Steel that came out this year in 2022 just has so many interesting and fresh takes on classic DC characters. It's fresh and fun, and I got a variant cover of the first issue and it looks so sweet. Maybe one day I'll let you guys see it. Maybe. But definitely read this story. Definitely do it. Number 4, Miracle Man. Miracle Man is also not a new character. In fact, Marvel's Miracle Man is one of comics' most dramatic publishing debacles, coming back from 1954. Decades of rights battles over the character meant that he kind of bounced around publishers and then disappeared from the pages of comics altogether for a long time, which is why it seemed way too good to be true when Marvel announced in 2013 that it had acquired the rights to Miracle Man. Now, over the years, the company has attempted to bring the character back, but even more legal issues kind of stopped that from being able to happen. But luckily, starting in October 2022, Neil Gaiman finally continued the Silver Age arc that he had created for the character, with Marvel planning a number of other Miracle Man books. So now, after all this time, we get both one of the newest and kind of one of the oldest characters all wrapped up into one awesome Miracle Man, Marvel Man, Mickey Moran, whatever you want to call him, shaped package. Number 3, Abyss. Alright, before you jump on me in the comments, this isn't the villain Abyss. That guy was Lex Luthor's own evil Batman, who was honestly kinda cool, but he did not last very long. Abyss was defeated by Batman, who got some massive help from a Bodnesian police officer named Detective Kea, who helped Batman not only survive, but even forced Abyss to retreat after he had defeated most of Batman Incorporated, which led him straight into a defeat at the hands of the Dark Knight himself. Now, after Abyss had been defeated, Kaya found some of the villain's equipment and decided to hunt down the ones who had ended her parents' lives. There's a lot of parallels between Batman and the characters in and around him in the later issues of Batman Volume 3 that came out this year in 2022. Anyways, Batman offered to help Kaya, but in helping her, he also talked her into just arresting the criminals instead of doing what she was planning to do, which I'm sure you can imagine what that was. She wasn't brought into Batman Inc., but she is now another ally of Batman, and I hope she gets some more appearances in the comics from this point on because the costume's pretty cool. Number 2, the Joneses. How about a whole family of superheroes for this spot? And not just that, but also some social and political commentary wrapped up into it. That sounds like so much fun. Not really. Anyways, out of AWA Studios comes The Joneses, which is a spin-off of another AWA Studios comic called The Resistance, and it focuses on a suburban family who have gained superpowers after a global pandemic known as the Great Death. All 4 family members, mother, father, sister, and brother, were all transformed into something superhuman but unfortunately, the world has begun to embrace fascism, born of fear of the pandemic and the superpowered individuals that have appeared, known as the Reborns. The Joneses face some pretty scary consequences if they are exposed as Reborns, and so they are presented with the dilemma of using their abilities for good at the risk of exposing themselves and inviting danger, or just laying low and staying out of the way. It's an interesting little idea for a comic book, and the global pandemic idea seems a little bit familiar. I don't know why. So I found it fun to just jump into this little 2022 comic from AWA Studios, and maybe you will too. Number 1. Guts and Glory. If you're part of the Thunderbolts, are you really a hero? Yes, you are. The problem for me and this list is that when Guts and Glory first appeared in Thunderbolts Volume 4 Number 1 from August 2022, we weren't really given much information on the guy, and we still haven't been really, which makes my job way harder. He was placed on Hawkeye's Thunderbolts team under the Mayor of New York, Luke Cage. The only reason given for this character's introduction to the team was that apparently having a, quote, man of mystery would do wonders for the team's public relations. That's actually the reason. There's literally nothing else given about why he's here. He is a big stocky guy with cyborg body parts and an absolutely insane amount of weaponry, including a particle rupture laser, which I don't even want to imagine what that thing does to a person. It just sounds horrible. He also looks a bit like Cable, as he's a totally 90s cyber-inspired warrior, but just more military and not nearly as old as Cable, with absolutely no information about his backstory, again, or his training. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marvel. Please change this. Gutson is cool, okay? Thank you.
Number 10. Alpha Flight. This is for sure the least obscure entry on the list, as I choose to talk about them constantly, and Alpha Flight has been somewhat reinvented in the last few years and changed into an international space force being led by Captain Marvel, but we are talking about the original team. First appearing in X-Men number 120, Alpha Flight was Canada's answer to the Avengers, with members with unique abilities from all over Canada. Unlike most super teams who are always working together, Alpha Flight operated in more of a Mission Impossible, James Bond kind of style, by choosing heroes from their roster and assigning each of them to specific missions that they would handle as individuals and pairs, only coming together as a full team in the case of extreme threats. Despite multiple tries by Marvel to give the team their own ongoing series, Alpha Flight has never quite caught on in the States. Perhaps they are just too specifically Canadian for a readership who tends to prefer American-centric stories, or maybe they just haven't been given the right push into the mainstream. Either way, Alpha Flight remains a team that not a huge amount of readers have heard of, and even fewer have actually read. Although, they did appear in one episode of the classic X-Men cartoon. Small victories. Number 9. ForceWorks. When it was determined that the Avengers' ever-expanding roster should be better divided up across the United States, rather than everyone working out of New York, the West Coast Avengers were formed. This experiment didn't end up working out, and the team was soon disbanded. In a typically Tony Stark move, Tony Stark decided that he should instead fund and create his own superhero team to help protect the West Coast. The resulting team was ForceWorks. The original team consisted of Iron Man, Spider-Woman, Wonder Man, and US Agent, with Scarlet Witch being chosen as the team leader. The team operated for a while, taking on threats like the Mandarin and Kang the Conqueror, but the team was plagued with internal issues. Despite Scarlet Witch being the team leader, Iron Man was constantly undermining her authority and forcing the team to carry out his personal vendettas. This attitude culminated in him forcing the team to brutally kidnap Hawkeye, which got him booted from the team. ForceWorks carried on without him for a while, but eventually decided to disband, although they were briefly brought back under the leadership of Maria Hill in order to fight the Robot Revolution. ForceWorks is an obscure offshoot of the already relatively obscure West Coast Avengers, however they did serve as the supporting cast for Iron Man's 90s animated series. Number 8. The Outlaws. Not to be confused with the team from DC Comics, Marvel's Outlaws are a group of heroes, all with a criminal past, who are led by Spider-Man and Silver Sable. The group formed when photographic evidence came out implicating Spider-Man in a robbery. Wanting to prove the innocence of the man who had helped them reform, Prowler, Rocket Racer, Will-O-the-Wisp, Paladin, and Sandman all began searching for evidence that would prove the webbed wall crawler's innocence. They discovered that Spidey was actually working for Silver Sable, and that what he had stolen was actually incriminating evidence against a member of the Maggia crime family. Impressed with the group's skills, Silver Sable brought them on as freelancers, and the team would occasionally come together, usually whenever Spider-Man was being framed or something and needed support support from outside of the Avengers. Although some of the various members of the team are relatively well-known characters, their team isn't well known as they come together so rarely and haven't teamed up since 1991. Number 7. Psyforce. When a telepathic CIA agent named Emmett Proudhawk had a vision about 5 young people with psychic abilities being protected by a hawk, he decided to track down the people in his vision and bring them together to become Psyforce. He got most of them together but was killed by a Russian operative. The 5 psychic youths discovered that when they all touched Proudhawk's mystic medallion, it summoned a creature called the Psyhawk who would help them defeat their enemies. You know, like Captain Planet. The youths worked together to defeat an evil Russian paranormal named Rodstov, and they were chased by members of the CIA, the KGB, and a shadowy organization called the Medusa Web, who eventually brought the kids on as freelance agents. Although they had their own 32-issue series, the fact that this Marvel team has no recognizable superheroes and is based in Earth 148,611 rather than the mainstream Earth 616 universe keeps them pretty obscure. Number 6. Force of July. The first DC entry on this list, Force of July were an Americana-themed group who often found themselves at odds with the Outsiders. The Force answered to the American Security Agency and were tasked with eliminating anyone whose activities were deemed to be subversive to America's interests by any means necessary. Some of the team's members include Lady Liberty, Silent Majority, Sparkler, Mayflower, and their leader, Major Victory. Although they aren't technically villains, their fanatic patriotism prevented them from seeing that they were being manipulated by their handler, who was using them to help his scheme to create a satellite called Project Orwell that would have been used to spy on people using their televisions. This plot was stopped by the Outsiders, and the Force of July later found themselves fighting against the Suicide Squad, who killed Sparkler and Mayflower. The remaining members ended up joining the squad but did not last long on the team's roster. Number 5. The Inferior Five. Coming from Earth 12 in the DC multiverse, this team are the nepo babies of a team of heroes called the Freedom Brigade. When the Freedom Brigade retired, the heroes encouraged their children to follow in their footsteps, and they started a team dedicated to protecting the people of Megaopolis. Known as the Fearsome Five, the members of this team, Awkward Man, Blimp, Dumb Bunny, and Whitefeather, have somewhat useless and conflicting powers, and although they usually manage to save the day, it is usually a result of dumb luck rather than skill. Their lameness led to the people of Megalopolis calling their champions the Inferior Five, which the team eventually decided to adopt as their official name. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, their world was destroyed, and as a result they were sent to comic book limbo, which is a realm similar to the Island of Misfit Toys, where characters who are written out of continuity remain until they're brought back into continuity. Number 4. The League of Losers. In the Marvel universe of Earth 6215, a time-traveling villain from the future named Kronoke used his knowledge of the past to travel back in time to the present with an army and kill all of Earth's mightiest heroes. Fortunately, the records he was working off of did not include any reference to these C-list Marvel characters because none of them had ever done anything that was worthy of note. Darkhawk, Speedball, Dagger, Terror, X-23, Gravity, and Sleepwalker were thus able to take on Kronoke and travel back to before the villain had stolen his time travel tech and stop him. Although this stranded the team in the future, it also created a divergent timeline known as Earth 2992, where the villain's scheme was never an issue. Wow, time travel can be such a pain to explain. Number 3. Section 8. One of the strangest teams in the DC universe, Section 8 is a group of what I will very generously call heroes who operate out of Gotham City. Each member of the team is more bizarre than the last, so buckle up. Shakes is a schizophrenic with a speech impediment. Jean de Baton is a stereotypical Frenchman who hits people with a baton. Defenestrator is a massive former Arkham inmate who carries around a window to smash over his enemies' heads. Flemgem spits massive amounts of snot at his enemies in order to blind them. Bueno Excelente is just some guy who sneaks up on his enemies and then essays them. Dog Welder is a crazy person who welds dogs to people's faces, and Friendly Fire is a hero who can shoot energy beams but is incapable of hitting anything he aims at, usually hitting his teammates instead. They are led by Sixpack, an alcoholic who pees himself and then attacks people with a beer bottle. Shockingly, this team has not gotten a big budget movie, and all of them were killed after an encounter with the mini-angled ones, with the exception of Sixpack, who suddenly manifested reality-warping powers to defeat the villains and save the world. Number 2. The Neo Knights. After having great success publishing comic books based on Hasbro's line of G.I. Joe toys, the two companies collaborated again to create the series that would give much-needed backstory for Hasbro's new line of toys, the Transformers. A lot of the Transformers mythology came from these comics, but due to the rights of certain characters remaining with the comic book company, not all of the elements were brought over for the television series or subsequent films. One of these elements is the superhero team, the Neo Knights. When the Autobots returned to space, leaving no one to protect their longtime ally, GB Blackrock, he decided to bring together a team of superpowered humans in order to fight any Decepticons that caused trouble on Earth. The members are Circuit Breaker, a woman who was paralyzed in an encounter with the Transformers and has developed a special suit that allows her to walk as well as fly and shoot repulsor beams. Also on the team are Thunder Punch, a man who can enlarge his feet and hands and punch with heightened strength, Rapture, a woman who can cause any sentient being to shut down and enter an elaborate fantasy, and Dynamo, who could channel the planet's latent energies. They are extremely obscure, only showing up in the original US and UK Transformers comics, and due to Hasbro having the rights for most of the Transformers and Marvel owning the rights to this team, they are likely to remain so for quite some time. Number 1. The Forgotten Heroes. They may have more appearances than some of the other teams on this list, and some of their members are relatively well known, but with a name like the Forgotten Heroes, how could they not end up on the top spot for this list? The team consists of a bunch of DC heroes who all stumbled upon ancient golden pyramids. When the heroes tried to report what they had found, the US government disavowed them and ruined each of their reputations to discredit them. Immortal Man brought all the heroes together and filled them in that the pyramids were part of a scheme by Vandal Savage to kill Superman. They formed a team together and teamed up with the Man of Steel to stop Vandal's plot. The team lives up to its name with members like Atomic Knight, Ballistic Congo Bill, Cave Carson, Dolphin, The Ray, Vigilante and Resurrection Man, as well as a few slightly more well-known heroes such as Rip Hunter, Animal Man, and Rick Flag.
Number 10. Uncle Marvel. For those who are new to the DC Captain Marvel world and whose introduction to the character may have been with the first film Shazam, you might not know about the extended members of the Shazam or Marvel family. But don't worry, we're here to make sure no one ever forgets. Uncle Marvel, you'd assume, was Billy Batson's uncle. But no, he actually claimed to be Mary Batson's uncle after discovering her superhero identity as Mary Marvel, but he really wasn't her uncle at all. Dudley H. Dudley was a civilian name, and he was originally the janitor at their school. Still, despite the fact that the Marvel team knew that Dudley was a fraud, or a dud if you will, who made up the story of being Mary's uncle simply so he could join them, they decided he was mostly harmless and enjoyed his company enough to accept him as Uncle Marvel, a portly older man with no powers who attributed his frequent power loss to his ever-flaring Shazambago. Ouch, my Shazambago.
Number 9. Sparky. Once a sidekick to one of DC's most underrated heroes, the original Blue Beetle, comes Sparkington J. Northrup, an American orphan who was adopted by Lord Wellington Northrup of Suppleshire, England. All was well and good with his life up until World War II, when Sparky was sent back to the US by his dad for safety, where he ended up becoming the sidekick of the hero Blue Beetle instead. Although he doesn't look like much, Sparky is actually a pretty decent fighter and was a huge asset during his time as Blue Beetle's sidekick. Described by Blue Beetle himself as a fighting, leaping little athlete on whom he can depend on for assistance at all times, it was really strange that he just kinda up and vanished from the series in 1942. However, he did show up again a year later to help the Beetle on the Western Front. Once the war was finally over though, Sparky was able to return to his home in England and retire from the hero business forever.
Number 8. Alpha. This Spider-Man sidekick happened to go to the same school as Peter Parker, and had a similar accident which granted him superpowers. However, he was known for being an underachiever with a C-grade average, and it was his laziness and lack of responsibility when it came to wielding his powers that prompted Spider-Man to remove Alpha's powers. Alpha originally became Spider-Man's sidekick after Spider-Man helped free him and his parents from Jackal, who had kinda hoped to take Alpha's powers for himself. It was after this encounter that Spider-Man both made him a sidekick and then kinda realized how irresponsible he was and decided to drain his powers using the villain Terminus's power siphoning staff. Slowly, Spider-Man would restore Alpha's powers over time. Alpha's civilian name is Andrew Maguire, no relation to Tobey Maguire, but his name does seem to be in honor of both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, who had both played Spider-Man on the big screen previous to when his character was created.
Number 7. Nyx. Leaving Marvel and DC for a bit of a change, we're going to be taking a look at Image Comics' Carrie Andrews, the on-again, off-again sidekick and love interest of the anti-hero Spawn. Becoming a spellcaster by the age of 4, Carrie was originally just a witch who was interested in Spawn, who named herself Nyx after the powerful Greek goddess. With a vast array of magical abilities including retrocognition, sound manipulation, and a psychic link, Carrie has been a huge help to Al Simmons' Spawn whenever she is by his side. She even at times donned the Spawn costume herself, which gave her all the powers of the Hellspawn alongside her magical abilities. During her time as Al Simmons' sidekick, she journeyed through the pits of hell, was possessed by a demon, and was even depowered by mystical forces. But in the end, she did get them back and decided to leave Spawn altogether, succumbing to the guilt she felt from the time that she betrayed the man she loved. Man, if that ain't true love, I don't know what it is.
Number 6. Bob. Bob used to work as a Hydra agent and was basically forced into becoming Deadpool's sidekick when Deadpool infiltrated a Hydra base and ran into the poor goon. He has popped up here and thereafter in the Deadpool comics, often appearing as Deadpool's reluctant or sometimes over-enthused sidekick, often hoping that Deadpool will treat him better this time around, only to be disappointed. At one point, Deadpool bought himself a pirate ship and had Bob join him once more as his sidekick, which meant not that Bob got to dress up as a badass pirate, but instead was forced to wear a parrot costume and finish every sentence with a squawk. During his time serving Deadpool on the ship, he almost died of dehydration due to how stuffy and how hot it was inside that costume under the blazing Caribbean sun. Poor Bob.
Number 5. Doiby Dickles. Now if you're not familiar with the first Green Lantern Alan Scott, then you probably don't know who Charles Doiby Dickles is. But hey, that's okay, that's what I'm here for. Back in the golden age of comics, Alan Scott had Doiby join him on his adventures for pretty close to 8 years after Doiby saved him from a group of gangsters. Although he didn't possess any powers, Doiby is surprisingly badass, as not only was he a skilled fighter, he was an excellent driver and pilot. In his beloved taxi that he named Goitrude, he has driven Green Lantern around at lightning fast speeds, which honestly seems a little bit silly considering that Alan Scott could fly, but I don't know, maybe he got tired sometimes. Dickles has made several cameo appearances since his original run ended, mostly as a comedic relief character in the early 2000s. His most famous modern appearance was when he joined a group of other forgotten Golden Age sidekicks in order to form the hilariously inept group Old Justice. Now I personally would love to see more of him in the future, so DC, get on that.
Number 4. Terra. But not that Terra. This Terra is also known as Atlee and is from an underground world known as Strata. Her and her people take it upon themselves to protect the Earth and its ecosystem. Atlee herself was granted geokinetic powers which she uses to do this. Atlee's powers are a genetic duplicate of the original Terra, who is often known for her ties to the Teen Titans, Tara Markov. Atlee herself has teamed up with both Supergirl and Power Girl and has even allied herself with Harley Quinn, thinking she was doing good by helping Harley to steal from the Joker's vault. Which she sort of was.
Number 3. Zook. Now I don't know about you guys, but I find it really hard to believe that the stoic and pretty much emotionless Martian Manhunter had this little guy as a sidekick. Hailing from an alternate dimension, Zook is a member of the alien race known as, well, Zooks, and came to Earth alongside a few other evil aliens after a portal was opened. Zook met up with Martian Manhunter while he was trying to apprehend the 2 evil aliens and instantly took a liking to the hero. And I think the feeling was a bit mutual because when Zook was left stranded on Earth when the dimensional rift back to his home was closed prematurely, John Jones took him under his wing. Zook has a number of abilities thanks to his alien physiology. He can change his body temperature to be extremely hot or extremely cold, he can see through disguises no matter how complex, and can flatten or expand his body as a defense mechanism or to make him fit into tight spaces. Sadly though, he disappeared from the DC continuity after the events of Infinite Crisis.
Number 2. Spider-Bite. Spider-Bite is Spider-Man's biggest fan and pint-sized sidekick, who has only appeared in one comic, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue number 6 from 2019. He helped Spider-Man take on the Sinister 60, though this is later revealed to be a make-pretend adventure for Spider-Bite's benefit. In reality, Spider-Bite is Nathan, a young boy who's fighting cancer and whose one wish was to become Spider-Man's sidekick, which is why Spidey came to join him for this adventure-filled day. At the end of Spidey's visit, Nathan doesn't want Spidey to leave, as he's afraid if he goes to sleep, he may never wake up. Spider-Man agrees to extend his visit and takes Nathan out with him for a bit to swing around New York. Aww.
Number 1. Zack. Just Zack. Created solely for the 1980s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon comes Zack, a little boy who appeared for the first time in Season 3 Episode 26 entitled The Fifth Turtle. As the biggest self-proclaimed TMNT fan, Zack was so crazy about the Turtles that he took up arms with a hockey stick, tossed on a green bandana, and attempted to help them in their fight against crime. Now obviously the Turtles wanted absolutely nothing to do with the young crime fighter at first because, well, they didn't want him to get hurt, but when Zack was able to secretly follow them back to their lairs, they decided that he had what it took to be a part of the team, making him the 5th Turtle. Although he's just a pretty average kid, Zack had a knack for solving mysteries and tracking down the bad guys, and across 4 seasons, he helped the Turtles go up against villains like the Rat King, Shredder, and even more. Although, he wasn't the best under interrogation though, since he was the only one not able to withstand the tickling interrogation, which, you know, I kinda understand because I'm pretty ticklish too.